Welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. I am your host, Rohit Bhargava, and we have a wonderful panel set for you right now where we are going to talk all about Manels, hashtag Manels. We'll tell you what that is if you don't know. And we're going to talk about what it takes to share the stage, what it takes to create more diverse audiences and more diverse speakers for the stage. And we are joined by some real experts in this space, and I'm so excited to introduce them to you. First of all, we have Monica Sack from South by Southwest, a huge event, and she is the Director of Programming Advancement. Welcome, Monica. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to be with you today.
Thank you. We also have Bonnie Stetz, who is with the National Association of Realtors, a huge organization that puts on many events and in the recent past, many virtual events. So nice to have you with us, Bonnie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Next, we've got Dino Myers-Lamptey, who is a multifaceted human being. He's got a agency group called The Barbershop, and he's also the founder of a group called Diverse Speakers, which is aimed at getting more diverse speakers to be appreciated, invited, and onto the stage globally at events. So welcome, Dino.
Hi, guys.
And finally, last but not least, we have Tash, who is part of multiple groups herself. She's a part of DICE, and she's also a part of the European Co-working Assembly. And we will talk a little bit about what DICE is and all of her background as well. So welcome to you, Tash.
Hi, nice to be here.
Great. So the first place that we have to start with is a little bit of a definition of what is a Manel. I know each one, this is like a softball question for all of you, but maybe Tash, you can take this one and talk about what is a Manel and also the mission behind DICE. Well, what is it? What does it stand for? And what does it do?
Yes, so the Manel is a term coined when we tend to have a lot of panel events. So this can be conference events, and it's across multiple industries as well, where we have an event that is made up solely of men. It's a male panel. And so obviously what we're seeing here is a severe lack of diversity, and this is something that DICE, as an initiative, the DICE Charter is working to eradicate, not just within specific industries, but across industries, and looking at events and ensuring that when we have panels specifically, that they are diverse and representative of full communities and not just the male voice in a panel.
Yeah, it's so important. And one of the things that we did from day one with this particular summit is we went and got our DICE certification before we'd even landed any speakers, because it was so important to us right from the beginning. And as we did that, and as we started thinking about speakers, one of the temptations, maybe temptation is the wrong word, one of the traps that we aimed to avoid was bringing speakers on and creating a diverse stage solely because they were diverse. We weren't going to compromise on the vision or any of the speakers, and you don't have to. And that's one of the interesting things about this, that a lot of times people who are putting together events, they say, oh, well, let's just get somebody to fill that gap so that we can check the box. And it's really more than that. And Monica, I want to bring you into this because you are head of programming advancement at a huge event, South by Southwest. I don't even remember how many speakers you bring in every year, but you have high amounts of competition for those slots. You use a panel picker process. I've been a speaker at South by Southwest for the last 10 years. So I know it well as a speaker. But I wonder if you could talk about how you think about, at an event of that scale, bringing in diverse speakers, and what does diversity mean to you?
Thanks for the question. So diversity does mean a whole bunch of different things to me, as well as to different people in general. As you mentioned, we do use Panel Picker to source our ideas for the event. That is where we give our community an opportunity to let us know what they think is important, what kind of topics we should be talking about, and whatnot. And what comes out of that is there are certain topics that float to the top, but how you talk about those topics is kind of what makes things really unique and diverse. And when we think about diversity, we do think about the diversity in gender, but we also think about the diversity as far as perspectives are concerned, the experiences that people have, that is dependent on where they're from, their backgrounds, their experiences, all of that kind of contributes to what we try to focus on. Geography is one thing, different opinions are another thing, and gender is definitely one of the big ones. As Tash previously mentioned, it is really easy to just have a panel be all men, but since I've been at South by Southwest now for 11 years, we've always focused on diversity, and we have had hard conversations with a lot of panel organizers that are like, well, we don't have an expert that is a female, and our response to them is, well, there's definitely experts in your fields that are females, and those voices definitely need to be presented on these panels.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to raise because in some cases, someone's coming to you with a panel already set, right? And so you may love the idea, but they haven't brought together a diverse range of speakers because not everyone's thinking in this way. And it's so interesting that this has become one of those challenges. And you mentioned that it's super easy to get a panel of just all men. One of the things that was funny in the organizing of this event in particular, and our organizing team has 8 people, and I'm the only male on that team. And we were about 75% of the way through organizing this panel when, organizing the whole event, when I went to the team and I said, look, we don't have enough guys. Like we need to bring some more men into some of these sessions because, like, if you're talking about ageism at work or neurodiversity, I mean, these are not female issues, right? Most things are not like it's just for this gender or that gender. It's for everyone. And most events have this challenge of it being uniformly presented towards one or the other. And it's frustrating. And I want, Dino, you to comment on this because your group that you started and your initiative around diverse speakers, I think, was sort of born out of this frustration. I mean, you were at events, you write about this and talk about this. You were at events and you were seeing these stages that were not inclusive, and you thought to yourself, well, I can do something about this. And you did. So tell us about what you did and what motivated you to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think that, being in the advertising industry and the media industry, that we like to celebrate ourselves quite a lot. And I think that attending all sorts of events, whether they're conferences or even awards events, and you see the same kind of faces always going up and collecting the awards and doing the speeches and presenting on the panels, and you just know that that isn't the full depth of the industry. And added to that as well, I think there was a reaction from a lot of attendants at these events that were just reacting when they would see the panels, and in forums like Slack or WhatsApp groups, they'll be sharing all the discussions, saying that what's going on, why is it such a one-sided panel in front of us? And these discussions were happening. You felt a little bit sorry for some of the organizers, I guess, but you just knew that there were a lot of people that just weren't being given the opportunity to shine on stage. And I think that the real frustration, I guess, is that when somebody goes up on stage, they are a role model. They are standing there, and sometimes the title is the future of advertising, the future of this, the future of that. And if there's a lack of representation, it just paints the picture that just says to people in the industry that, well, you just can't get to the top levels, you just can't get to this platform. So off the back of having too many events with too many let's say just very bland panels, I just thought, actually, let's just do something about it, and let's set up a site which is diverse speakers, and let's get more diversity up on stage. And that's how it happened, really. And it was an instant success. We had over 150 speakers to date have registered, and there's been over 40 event requests as well.
Yeah, I love that, because you're giving people a platform and you're saying, hey, here's where to go. Because what you do hear a lot of times in the events business is, oh yeah, we'd love to get diverse speakers, but there just aren't any. And and it's an excuse, really. I mean, what they're really saying is they're too hard to find. Like I can't easily find them, or whomever is sourcing speakers for me hasn't found them for me without me doing any work.
Yeah, and I guess as well, in defense of some of the people that are responsible for filling the stages, let's say, is they've probably never really been given the metric or the KPI to make the panels as diverse as they should be. So, a lot of the time they're using kind of, old school methods to pick panels, popular names that have been there for years, or, just asking friends who they recommend. And of course, you get the same kind of familiar choices. So, it's about putting this in their consciousness and making it really easy for them to make an right choice.
Yeah, that's right. And Bonnie, I know you have been at an organization that's been very forward thinking when it comes to this, the National Association of Realtors. I mean, you have a population, a member base that is widely diverse, and you've done quite a lot to make sure that that diversity is reflected on the stage as well. So, to Dino's point, I mean, was that a KPI that someone gave you that said, look, we need diverse speakers? Was it something that was led by someone, or was it just kind of an evolution?
Sure, and I think it's a great point that when you are used to working in the same population, even though our members are 1.4 million members, which really makes us a microcosm of the U.S., that you still just go back to the most popular speakers or the most popular people in the industry, and what happens when you need to make sure that you have a diverse group of speakers. And that means that you need to expand your outreach and you need to expand your connections to make sure that the invitation, when you're looking for that invitation, that it gets to the right people, that it gets to people who are capable, but didn't necessarily feel invited by an open call. So it was not a KPI. This year, we are making a lot of advancements towards installing KPIs, but this is something that's meant something to me coming from programming globally, that diversity is important because it's a built-in way to make your content more compelling. Hearing from somebody different, even if it's on a topic that you've talked about 1,000 times, if it's a different face and if it's a different experience and a different perspective, you automatically are building in new content and it's more compelling.
Yeah, one of the things I'm always thinking about is the voice of the audience who's watching this. And I imagine there's two big groups of people who will be very interested in the conversation we're having right now. One of them are people who are putting on events, who are trying to find more diverse speakers and who are trying to make their stage more inclusive. And on the flip side, you've probably got a lot of people who speak, people who want to be discovered and who are hungry to be on the stage, but maybe don't have the visibility yet to be easily found in a Google search. Can you talk a little bit, Bonnie, about how you think about finding speakers and the things that you go through, and maybe speak to both of those audiences just to say, look, here are some tips for how to go about finding some of those speakers. And then if somebody's trying to get discovered, here are some ways to get on the radar of someone like you who's putting together lots of events and hiring speakers.
Sure. One of the best tips I can say is to start with the end product in mind. So what do you want your audience to take away? What experience or new knowledge or tools do you want them to have? And working backwards from there, if you're focusing on the deliverables, then you aren't focusing on a name and you aren't focusing on the most popular name. And so I think going into those circles or making sure that you're looking up something like, a diversity speakers bureau, or looking into who's been researched or who's been interviewed, but maybe not doing TED Talks and those kinds of things. That gives you kind of a new avenue to discover new voices in an arena. Also making sure, again, building your network so that you have people to ask that aren't necessarily in your echo chamber. They're not sharing exactly what you do and how you do it. And so maybe their perspective is going to be cross-cutting enough to give you a new idea of where to look. For people who want to be discovered, I think that it's going to be a lot about asking the questions and then looking up people who are doing programming and content. And even if you aren't in their vertical, talking to them and making sure that, maybe getting some tips from them, even if that's not a conference that you would necessarily be speaking at. All of the people in my position can give tips on how to be seen in a certain area, or, making sure that you have a good demo, or, what kinds of things are going to matter in that application process. So I do think that just the more you talk and the more you search out those opportunities in that space, you're going to be able to build that network.
Yeah, Monica, you are in a very diverse team. You're part of a very diverse team that brings speakers from really all over the world. And you've I didn't really ask how long you've been part of that team or how long you've been doing it, but in the time that you've been there, what have you seen that has been some of your go-to techniques to think about making sure that stages and panels are as diverse as possible? And in particular, when someone comes to you, like let's say I have a killer idea for a panel and it gets through the panel picker and it gets approved, and then when you see who the panelists are, you're like, whoa, that's not diverse at all. What do you go, do you go back to that moderator and say, hey, you need to change the people? How do you deal with that?
Well, we deal with it in a couple of different ways. Like, because South by Southwest is well known and a large event, we do already get a lot of proposals that come through Panel Picker that, you know, are smaller names and that we do want to highlight and give them a platform, because either we think that what they're saying is really important, we want to be able to highlight their experiences and whatnot. Like, those are great. We want to be, and our live event has been big enough to be able to carve out a space to highlight some of those voices that may not have been able to be highlighted on other stages. To what you were saying about ideas coming in where they're great, but we look at the speaker lineup and we are thinking, well, okay, that's not as great as the idea itself. We do go back to the organizer and specifically work with them directly and say, the idea is great, but there needs to be more diversity on a particular panel. We sometimes get pushback, but I think more oftentimes than not, it's the idea of, well, we wanted to have more diversity in our voices, but we just don't know the people. And in those instances, our conference team will actually work directly with the organizer. Our network is also big enough, like we've had enough experiences with many different speakers in the past or in many, many different industries where we can help connect organizers with some potential speakers that will, you know, give more diversity to their panel, because the diversity also helps with the overall engagement in the topic that they're discussing. And that engagement also bleeds into the audience. The audience is more engaged. So we totally want to work with the organizers to set them up for success, because their success is kind of everyone's success.
Yeah, it's that's very, very true, and it is a great fight. And Tosh, you have a role as a director of DEI at the Co-working Assembly, and as part of that, I imagine your role is to be the one who's fighting for this. And I'm not saying it's always a fight, but maybe you could take us inside what that dialogue is like. I mean, are you the one who's always like, hey, you got to do a little bit more, like you're not doing enough? Like, is that your role? And if so, how does that go for you?
Well, fortunately, the European Co-working Assembly as an organization is one of their key focuses actually is diversity and inclusion as an organization themselves, but also they are definitely a role model for the co-working industry. So for them, it's about having somebody, my position is about helping to encourage co-working spaces as a whole, and how they can implement diversity and inclusion. It's funny, that was kind of that was how I initially got connected to DICE as well, is that the co-working industry is built off of events, probably more so live events originally. And DICE obviously being connected to that and having that initiative, the idea that one of the big things that we champion at DICE is that when an event is thinking about diversity and inclusion from day one, it's way more successful in terms of the ending event. So you're not having that situation where 2 weeks before the event actually goes ahead, somebody else is looking at the event and saying, why is everyone in the panel? Why does everyone look the same? Oh my gosh, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. Actually, if you think about it and implement it from day one, as everyone else has attested to, the success of your event is that much greater, but also it's immediately more diverse. The perspectives that you're giving and also the audience that's then coming to participate in that event is a much more successful event. And this is something that we're really trying to push within the co-working industry, because it's fundamentally built so much on collaboration and event spaces, and networking is a huge aspect of co-working as a whole.
Yeah, and in your work with Dice in particular, and we've been working with one of the main members there, Amy Keene, for pretty much the whole event. She's been really instrumental in pulling together the event. And there's specific criteria that are part of this certification that Dice has put together. And one of the comments that I think she made as we were putting this together, which was quite funny, is this is the diciest conference in the sense that, it's really hitting all of these different things, because we've talked a little bit about diversity and defining diversity, but there are some very specific criteria there, and some of them are obvious, things like race and gender, and some of them are perhaps a little bit less obvious. Like, one of the audiences that we worked very hard to include in this summit is one that's way too often completely left out of entire conferences about diversity, which is people with disabilities. And we spent a lot of time involving people with all different types of disabilities, from physical disabilities to neurodiversity, and their entire. It just struck me that in this world of diversity and inclusion, there are entire categories that sometimes get forgotten. Ageism, for example, is like hardly ever talked about when it comes to diversity. Like, do we have enough diversity of age? As in, are we involving anybody over the age of 55 in our events? So there's so many different lenses on this that you need to think about, and having an organization like that is really helpful. When you think about the work that you've done as a Dice ambassador, like, what is the role of that? Is it to go to events and essentially say, hey, you should be going after this classification, this certification? Like, what is the importance of that?
The importance is actually just getting the word out there. The idea of Dice, whilst it's been created, it's this amazing charter that's there to help support events. Ultimately, and Amy will say so herself, we want to make it redundant. We don't want to be talking about Dice in 5 to 10 years' time. It should be that Dice is a thing of the past. And as you mentioned there, in terms of the criteria is based on the legal obligations. So the 2010 Equality Act, UK Equality Act. And so we're stripping the emotion out of it. A lot of people can get very passionate when it comes to diversity and inclusion and have their opinions based on emotion most of the time. But actually, if we give you the hard facts, and it's 9 protected characteristics in the UK Equality Act, accessibility being one of those characteristics, it gives people the idea that, okay, well, I can stick with stats and I can roll through stats and I understand that and I can measure that very easily. And yes, neurodiversity and accessibility is one that gets forgotten about, because so many of us forget the privilege that we have in this sector. So whilst, yes, we are all talking about manels and gender diversity and race equality, there are also intersections within that. And I'm a massive advocate for intersectionality and how so many identities for each of us cross over.
Yeah, me too. I love that idea of it's sort of at the heart of this Non-Obvious brand. It's like, get outside of your comfort zone, be more open-minded, like, see different things. It's all about intersectionality. So I love that. Bonnie, when you put together a event and you're identifying all the different speakers that will be part of that, and you put together a diverse stage, do people notice, or is it the sort of thing where they just notice if it's not diverse?
That's a really great question. I think we have heard more and more from people who would like to see more diversity in different areas for all of our events and our committees. Even though I think that we do a reasonably good job of making sure that that we have been more and more inclusive and making sure there's a leadership path for more diverse and new voices. So I do think, though, that there are comments when they say, oh, this is somebody I never would have thought of. I don't think that they're recognizing necessarily the diversity. I don't think they're labeling it, but they definitely notice it. This is a perspective I didn't think about. This is something I haven't heard before. And so the fact that it's coming from somebody who is a fresh new voice, they know that, but I don't think they're labeling it for themselves. And so, but to me, that says, hey, this was good. And I think it was good because we were able to give them something new and something fresh, something they haven't heard before, from a speaker that they've heard, at every single event that they've ever been to in the real estate space. So, and that goes across the board, I think. So as long as you are, I think when you make that effort, it is not lost on people, but they might not be labeling it the way that they, as obvious.
Well, and speaking about labeling, I think one of the things that does happen sometimes at events is you will see the best of intentions towards bringing a diverse perspective in, and what I'll see happen sometimes is there will be an event, and for example, there would be a panel that would be, here's the female executive Latina panel, and they'll find 4 female executive Latinas, and they'll put them on one panel, and everyone will kind of go to that panel and say, oh, that's what it's like to be a female Latina executive, and not think about taking that same female executive Latina and looking at what her expertise is and putting her into the panel where she's talking about her expertise as opposed to her experience of just being who she is. When you, maybe it's a progression, when you look at those different styles of doing diverse programming, Bonnie, is it a continuum, as in like, look, we have to first introduce what the experience is so people get it before we can kind of integrate it? Is it both at the same time? Do you tend to lean towards one or the other? Have you even segmented it that way?
So that's another great question. It's actually my mission to not fall into that, because I do think that all too often it's like, put somebody on a pedestal, check the box. Here we've had them in their experience. And so we have had, just in the last 2 years, we had an LGBTQ panel, but it wasn't about necessarily them talking about their experience in the real estate world. It was them sharing how you can be inclusive in your marketing to those kinds of customers, and how you can be inclusive in your business to those realtors who want to join your brokerage, but they aren't necessarily part of, maybe the brokerage is a little bit more homogenous than to have been inclusive of that kind of perspective before. And so we've intentionally tried not to, when we do label people, it is usually still giving an expertise, like a level of expertise that they have versus an experience of like, oh, this is what it's like for me. And so, especially in the last year, this past annual event that we had, I made a lot of effort to make sure that we were being as diverse as possible with business topics. So getting diverse voices on business topics versus using their diversity as a representation. I don't think that that's necessarily always a bad thing. Sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it is an entry point for people. But I think where we all want to be is we are equal, and we all have business talents, and that's what we should be talking about. And you can bring a new perspective in that business arena just by being a diverse or different than what people are used to hearing. So it is my goal always to make sure that we are including a diversity of voices to any topic. And sometimes it's difficult, like cybersecurity in the real estate space. We got no applications from females or anybody of color. So that's something that actually I'm working on this year, is to make sure that we are inviting people. I think the power of an invitation is cannot be underestimated. Just to go out to groups that and say, hey, they're looking for this. We know that there are people who know this, backwards and forwards. Who can you tell about this opportunity so that we can get connected?
Yeah, for sure. Dino, I see you nodding along, and I would love your take on this, and in particular, your take on something that we do too often see at events, which is that we cross from diversity and inclusion into tokenism, and which is not where we want to be. So share your perspective on that, please.
I think the first thing I would say about panels at events are, a lot of the time the panels are just a little bit too boring, because they've got people on there that are not going to say anything provocative, challenging, surprising, or different, and they're all going to sit on there and agree with each other largely. And that can even come from the type of companies you recruit your panels from. Often the bigger, the more corporate companies, they're heavily policed in even what they can say. So from the audience perspective, it comes across as being really quite average and nothing really challenging and provocative. And so I think that the first thing you want to do is you want to mix up your panel to get those different perspectives. And every single issue you might be discussing, there might be some kind of big headline issue and topic, but if you veer off from that, you will find different opinions if the person's female or male or black or white or whatever. They'll just be coming at it from slightly different angles. And, you'd want to talk about the issues, maybe about, race and gender in the office place or something like that. You want to have that flexibility to be able to go to those places and get perspectives from people that are sitting in those positions dealing with those issues. So I think it's just it's really key just to keep the panels interesting and different, to have people really coming from different backgrounds and different places. I think for me that's one of the biggest issues, really. Just keeping your conference interesting by mixing up, putting people up there that people have never even seen before. And I totally agree with the point about just going a little bit further. Everyone knows someone if they think long and hard enough about it, and they're given that brief about, let's find someone that hasn't typically represented themselves on this stage. And also, I think that there's a responsibility from the people who are often asked themselves as well. Too often, I think that what's happened in the past is, a lot of the panels have been formed by people accepting the opportunity and not asking, well, who else is going to be on the panel? And, and is it as diverse as it needs to be? So I think there needs to be a lot of responsibility on the people that have been asked to be on that, take a seat. And even if they can't do it themselves, to then say, okay, I'm going to find someone that is much more diverse than me to fill this seat.
Yeah, you're sort of talking about an experience that I had literally 2 months ago. Just to do a little bit of a confession, which is I had unintentionally become part of basically a hashtag manel, even though it wasn't. So I had said yes to an event that was international. It was the future of something, to the point that I think you made earlier. And they had this social media graphic that showed 6 of their 10 featured speakers. And the 6 that they chose to show were all men. And so this social media graphic goes up and it's 6 men and it's talking about the future of marketing or something like that. And of course, there's this huge backlash. And now there's this long conversation. All of us are solo speakers, actually. We're not even on a panel together. I didn't even know who else was speaking, but I should have asked. And now we all look really bad. And there was nobody jumped into the conversation. So pretty much immediately I went into the conversation and I said, yeah, this isn't right. I'm going to go back to the event and ask them about it. So I didn't throw anybody under the bus. I just went back to the event organizers and they said, look, that was not a smart graphic, but we actually have 3 female featured speakers. We just didn't put them in the graphic. So beyond me telling them that was stupid, which they think they already figured out at that point, I went back to that whole commentary on LinkedIn and I said, look, they don't have enough female speakers. They do have some, but I've gone back to them. And what I'm going to do is take my keynote slot and I'm going to turn it into a panel. And I'm going to invite 2 female futurists, because that was about futurism. And we're going to have a panel discussion together. And that's what we did. And so it wasn't as good as me kind of taking my slot and just giving it to someone else, but it was something. And I'm sharing it not to focus on me. I'm sharing it as an example for anybody who's listening, who is a speaker at an event and who says, look, I'm not putting on the event. I'm just a speaker. Well, you do have an opportunity to still do something, even just as a speaker. And you don't have to do it in a way that makes the event look bad. You can do it in a way that's respectful of the event organizers and the time and attention that they've spent, but also in a way that brings more other speakers in. And so there is an opportunity to do that. And I just wanted to share that example with speakers because we can do that also as part of what we do. Tash, let's go back to you for a moment, and let's talk about some actionable tips. We want to move now our conversation into what can people do right now, whether they're thinking about whether they're participating in an event, like going to an event, or they're a speaker who's being invited or wants to be invited to events, or they're an event planner. I mean, really, you can take any of those angles, but we want to do like a quick round robin of all of us and share some of our real actionable advice on what has worked, what can we do, what can we specifically change in our perspective in order to help all of these events have more inclusive stages.
Absolutely. So kind of the first thing I would say is, as an event organizer, get dice. So that means going onto the website, getdice.com, and filling out the charter, which will basically, it's super easy to fill out, but it will give you a dice score of up to 100%, 100% obviously being that you are fully 100% inclusive. 40% is your first point to get certified. but it gives you clear actionables of how you can improve that score. And quite often people just go, well, actually, I hadn't even thought about this. And actually something tangibly putting this idea in front of me, like you had spoken about the accessibility factor, actually seeing it there and no, we're not doing this right now, is definitely the first step for event organizers. And I would then lead this to speakers. It's up to speakers to actually turn around to events and say, what's your DICE certification? That gives a clear indication. And if the event says, what's DICE? Okay, well, that's a different conversation. But if an event can turn around and actually say, yeah, we have 60% on DICE, okay, now I know that you're thinking about it. And the same again for people attending events, to actually reach out to the event and say, do you have a DICE certificate? What is your certification? What's your score? And this to become a mainstream standard for all events, that people see this certification and it's a clue and an indication that events are thinking about it.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about speakers and the stage, but one of the things that I'll just mention is, as part of this summit, in order to make it as accessible as possible, all of our sessions will actually have captions as well. And that's another piece, right? That needs to be thought about. It's not about who you put on the stage necessarily in that case. It's about just making sure everything's captioned. So, all right, let's go, Bonnie. Let's go to you. Let's talk tips. Let's talk some real actionable advice. Let's get down and dirty with it.
Yes. So for organizers, event organizers, I think, being that's what I am, that's the easiest way to speak to it. And number one thing is set the expectation that you are looking for fresh, diverse voices who are talking about new topics or new ways to solve old problems. And so I think Tasha had mentioned this earlier. When you set that expectation in the beginning, or maybe Dino said that, then you aren't scampering at the end to try to fix something that you didn't think about. So number one is setting that expectation in the proposal application, or if you are recruiting, verbally to that person that you're recruiting. And so making sure that is clear what you expect. And then I do think an open call for submissions is great. It's a great first step because it really allows a wide audience to apply, but then making sure that those proposals are juried by a diverse group of people, because it's only we know that there can be bias in the ratings of those proposals. And so making sure that your group that is jurying them is as diverse as the people who are submitting them is going to be a really important thing. We also require a video. And so we don't make them have a video that is a professional video, but they do have to demonstrate their skill. So this way it doesn't present a barrier to people who have been kept off of a stage because of bias. But it does say, here's a chance to prove, that you can make it on a national stage. I think those are the biggest tips I have.
These are great. I'm loving this fast and furious range of tips. This is great. So Monica, let's go to you, and then I'm going to give you the.
Well, a lot of my tips are similar to Bonnie's. For Panel Picker, we do incorporate a lot of the things that you were just talking about. The video, our advisory board does review all of the proposals that come in. We get at least 10 eyes on each proposal, and we work hard to make sure that our advisory board does have diversity. The other thing that I would stress, depending on how big your event is to do a lot of the work up front. Come up with exactly what you want, what you value, what you think is important, set that footprint, do the research to make sure that what you are representing is what aligns with the values of your company, as well as aligns with what you understand your community to want, and to really stick with that plan. While plans do change, if you have an initial plan to begin with, it'll make things so much easier down the road. And I think that is probably one of the most important things I've learned over the years.
Great stuff. And Dino, I'm sure you can bring it home for us. So
yeah, thank you. I mean, a lot of the great stuff has been said already. Advisory board, brilliant. I sit on a couple, but definitely make sure that's diverse. I would say a couple of things that, let's say people on low budgets, what they should probably do. Firstly, I mean, if you think of some obvious names, maybe when you ask those obvious names, ask those people to recommend someone else that they should go up instead of them, that is more diverse than they are. So if you think of Martin Sorrell first, ask Martin Sorrell who would he recommend to take his seat to represent what he does, so they can make the recommendation and give them the challenge of diversity, give them the challenge of changing the panel stage. Secondly, I would say, certainly, the service that we've got, Diverse Speakers, it's a non-for-profit, so there's nothing lost by being involved and asking for a speaker. So please just register, ask, and we supply a few different options or more if you need any. And then finally, I think it's related to the point earlier on about the poster that presents all the males on the panel rather than the full spread with the females as well. I'll say check what goes out. You might design and create a brilliant event, but then if your poster, the person designing your poster, just hasn't got that same consciousness as you have, then mistakes can easily be made, and it goes down badly on you. So make sure you check everything that goes out and how your event is being represented as well.
I love those tips, especially the last one. I mean, that would have that would have helped us a month and a half ago for sure at that one particular event. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I just want to say thank you to Bonnie, Monica, Dino, Tash. Thank you for being part of this conversation. I've had a great time. I've learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else who's been watching has also learned a lot. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You've been watching a special panel on Manels and how to create more inclusive conferences, events, and stages. If you've enjoyed this particular panel, it's just one of many at the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit, and you can watch more sessions like this at nonobviousdiversity.com. Our hashtag is nonobviousdiversity. My name is Rohit Bhargava. I'm the host of the Non-Obvious Insights Show, and I've been your host for this particular discussion. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here for this inclusive DICE certified conference. And remember to always stay non-obvious.